Hi guys, Paul from the innovation community here. Today I'm with Sami Uddin Ahmad, who's from Telenor Sweden. He's worked globally for Telenor for many years and is focusing on the analytics and AI function. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me here, Paul.
So just to start with, I mentioned that you've been working for Telenor globally. Just tell me a bit about yourself in a few words.
Right. So I'm currently working as head of analytics and AI at Telenor Sweden, which is one of our operating companies here. I moved here with my family 1.5 years ago, but overall with Telenor, it's been a little over 16 years now. So I've previously worked in Pakistan, in Thailand, both in operating companies as well as in some group functions. I have a tech background. I have spent my most of career in analytics field. But then I've also been part of various business teams. So it's a combination of technical and business teams that I lead. And very recently, I've also completed my executive MBA from IMD Business School in Switzerland. So that's pretty much about my profile.
It sounds like you've done a lot in the last few years or so. What's your favorite country that you've lived in, and why is that?
It's a bit hard to pick, but I would say probably Thailand because of I think its vibrance. It is a happening place. The weather is great, and I think there's just a lot of things you can do there. So probably I would pick Thailand.
Yeah, with the UK right now, it's usually rainy weather, and now that everyone's quarantined, it's now super sunny and clear skies. So that's typical English weather for you.
Yeah, it's even a bigger test for everybody.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you've been working for Telenor for some time now. Where did your career in data really start? It sounds like it was a tech role, and then it's kind of expanded to incorporate business as well. Is that right?
That's true, but the data career actually started even before that, when I was part of one of the largest analytics company called Teradata, and I was working as a global consultant. I started with one of our clients in Ireland. This was one of the biggest bank there, where we started working on their analytics solutions. That's the starting point, I would say, of my data career. And then I worked on various industries in retail and manufacturing, eventually leading into telecom.
And what really interests you about working in this space? Obviously, it must do because you've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah, it does. It does, certainly. I think the ability that when you work with the data, it opens up almost, I would say, limitless opportunities to bring innovation. When you look at the data, you see how do we do things differently? What does our customers really need? What are the problems to be solved? And then every time you are doing things, you can do things differently in a different dimension. That helps us in continuously innovating and improving the way we are. So it never actually lets your job getting bored or you feel that you're doing the same thing. It's always something new that you can do when you are actually working with data. That's what I really love about this domain.
And what are some of the major successes that you've achieved throughout this time?
I would say I would like to share a couple of examples and stories here. I think in one of my previous companies where I was working on, we ran a whole transformation project where we brought in the concept of marketing automation and moving from really old style batch-based customer engagement and communication to a more real-time, always-on kind of a campaigns, being able to drive much higher customer engagement and conversions that results into higher revenues, reduced churn. And the way we executed that, I think that's one of the bigger successes. It involved a lot of change management, not only just on the technology side, but also people, process, all of that. And then here in Sweden, I would say we have gone through a whole agile transformation, not only again on IT, but the way we run marketing. our go-to market and our ability to just being able to get from idea to execution in a matter of days is just phenomenal. I would say that's one of the key successes also.
And specifically looking at the role you're in now, we mentioned before about when we spoke that a lot of what you do is on roadmaps and strategies surrounding AI change and data. Two questions in one. How do companies set up their data strategies and analytics roadmaps, and how should they be doing it?
Right. So what I have seen based on my experience so far, I mean, there is no silver bullet of setting up your data strategies and your plans of going about it. But most of the time, what companies does is they build the whole plan around tech and how the technology is going to transform the way of work, and it's going to make your companies data driven. But what I have seen is that hardly works. Of course, you need technology; it's an enabler to achieve something. But as long as you don't actually have a view on what problem are you solving, what would this technology do, and then link it with the bigger picture, with the purpose. The chances of becoming successful are actually very minimal. I think the way companies should do it is first identify this is the problem that I'm going to solve. This is how it's linked with my overall business strategy, company strategy, the problems that I'm trying to solve, and then work backwards on the technology part. That helps us in, number one, being more agile, run small tests, whether that is actually going to solve the problem or not, and then we scale up rather than having a big bang tech project approach. Also, what I have seen is we have practiced that in Telenor, that the whole data analytics AI function is part of the marketing and the business side, including the tech part. So it makes it much more easier to make it business driven technology rather than a technology driven transformation on its own.
Yeah, I think that, especially from my experience working with senior leaders, people tend to look at that tech as, I like the way you phrase it, a silver bullet. The way that you seem to approach it is much more long lasting. It doesn't make for, makes for breaking down silos. I think is a really key part of that. When people get siloed into their own way of working, and technology isn't going to change that. It might change it for one business unit, it might change it for one segment of the business, one country, but it's not going to create overall positive change as well. What are some of the common pitfalls that people fall into when they're driving change with AI?
I think missing out on the culture part, rallying around the change, making sure that people understand what's in it for them, and then being able to actively engage all the stakeholders and analyzing how their life is going to change, the things that they do normally, how will AI help them in doing it better, faster, or just basically in a more effective and efficient way. I think that's one part. And then the other is that it's like I was saying, it's very easy to get kind of carried away by the tech itself, and saying that when we implement this technology, it will drive something, and then we miss out the bigger picture. So these two engagement, both making sure that you are covering the culture aspect, you are engaging your stakeholders, as well as you are having a tech that is driven by a purpose, a real business need, is essential to set up these strategies.
Interesting stuff. Now, you mentioned the word transformation quite a lot. I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. There's so many nuances to transformation: business transformation, tech transformation, agile. Tell me about a time that you affected change in a major organization, and what were the challenges that came with that?
Yeah. I can again refer to one of the past experiences where we brought in that marketing automation transformation that has not only just changed people way of work, but that has actually changed the way we look at customer lifecycle management. How do we drive higher value from engaging customers proactively? That could be one good case to see what the challenge is. Again, I think the first thing we need to understand the biggest challenge we had was the resistance from people, because they were actually they were in the habit of running campaigns manually. There were large part of the teams that were day in day out running those campaigns, reaching out to their customers, getting their feedback manually processed, and then moving to the campaign next day. So the whole job runs around how do we engage customers. Now, from that, to imagine a world where all of this is being managed automatically by an AI engine, reaching out to the customers, kind of an always on campaigns, seeing what the customers are, how the customers are reacting to our offers and communication, and then being able to adjust and tweak on our own, actually changes the way we look at the customers from a work-wise, but then also, for instance, how do we define success of a campaign? How do we look at, how do we do A/B testing? How do we set control groups to measure the success? Completely changes there. So I think we had challenges on multiple fronts. We had challenges in basically taking people along and making them believe that the new process will certainly change the way they work, but it will bring enrichment in the job. So rather than focusing on running those systems manually and technically, they can actually focus on more business aspects of whether that is resulting into gains, into benefits or not. That's number one. Number two is it's much easier to then link all the activities to business gains, whether it's moving the needle or not. And then not really undermining the technology challenges that comes as part of it. At times, the technologies are not mature enough. You see many things, many claims when you are talking to different vendors and you're going through the tech reviews or RFQs. When you implement them, then you actually see the on-ground realities and the challenges. And it's not also about one tech. When you talk about large enterprises, that tech has to work in an ecosystem where some of the platforms are legacy, some of the platforms are the new ones that you have recently procured. And how do you make all of those tech platforms work together is another dimension of a large challenge on its own. So a program of that scale needs to take care of both people, process, and technology part, I would say.
It's a great point. And I think that once you have the business problem, as you said earlier, that's the time for the technology. And even then the technology has to deliver. I mean, let's take a business problem like I need more customer data visualization. How are you currently leveraging technology to your advantage? What effects do you think it will have on the landscape over the next few years?
Right. So I think the first step we do is really to understand what is the problem. So and then what are the underlying drivers? Are we able to build some hypothesis around that? So for example, let's say we want more customer footfall, or let's say we want more customer visitors on our website. What are the underlying drivers why customers are not attracted on our website? Is it because the presence is not good? Is it because we are not showing up in the search results? Is it because we are not reaching out on the social media, etc.? So we set certain hypotheses. And the reason, in my view, we call this data science is because just like in your regular physical science, we are able to set experiments that results into a view that if I do this, this happens. Similarly, in the data, when we set the hypothesis, then we are able to set dependent, independent variables that leads to cause and effect. People are not doing this because of this thing. And then again, referring to the agile way of work, the next step, what we do is to test the hypothesis, we pick up a small set of customers, we run that test, and if the hypothesis is successful, then we scale it up. That is the fundamental at the heart and the center of how we can implement a data-driven approach for solving specific customer problems.
And I think people latch on to those projects that don't work out so well and point to that as an example of why this approach shouldn't work. But I think actually that's a lot of the learning, where a lot of the learning comes from. Okay, this one didn't work, we're not going to scale that up. This one had some successes, let's tweak it, and then let's try again. So I think, yeah, exactly. A really good approach that you have as well. regarding transformation, what's the one case study you point to where you think you made the biggest impact?
I would say when we were designing our analytics transformation in Sweden, what we were again able to do here, and the way and how I had an impact on the overall strategy again is being able to see what are the components of that transformation, how that transformation is going to impact the overall organization, and then engaging with the top management, not only in Sweden but with the group as well, and discussing why should we have this transformation, what are their challenges. For that, it was important for me to understand at a broader level what are our top business goals, how does data analytics and being able to drive a data-driven culture in the company helps that problem, and then come up with a set of activities and initiatives that forms part of our analytics transformation that one by one started to help and it created an impact in solving the problems that we had.
Mm. And as a strategic leader, you probably have a number of team members dotted all over the globe. How would you describe your leadership style in working with those leaders?
I would say that what's important for leader, at least the way I most of the time try to operate, what we call is a tight, loose, tight setup, where we say that you need to be very tight and crisp in setting the vision. Why we are doing this, what's in it for us, and how this will create an impact. There we try to have those impact maps that links together output, outcome, and then impact together. So everybody sees what's the vision, why we are doing it, and what's in it for them. That's the first tight. Then it gets into execution, and that's where we say we keep it loose, where how teams achieve certain things that are related to the vision, that are linked with it, and when they understand the impact is up to the teams. But with that empowerment, it's extremely important that we have the third step, which we call as, again, tight, which is the accountability, and having very clear, crisp KPIs where people are answerable to what they are doing. So understanding the vision, very tight, crisp, why we are doing it, and linked with the follow-ups and KPI measurement, very strong performance management. In between, it's up to people how they execute, and they are responsible for generating the impact. I would say my leadership style is based on more empowerment, but making sure accountability stays there.
Mm. And does that work up the chain as well when you're engaging and trying to communicate the data strategy with senior leadership?
I think that is at the heart of our whole agile transformation. It works at all the levels. So that's how my line managers, the top management of the company, the group actually operates. And if we don't do it at any of those levels, I think then the whole agile breaks up.
And is it executed well at all levels, do you think?
I think we have improved a lot in the last 1.5 years since we have rolled out this strategy or this way of work. It's a continuous journey. So it might never be that we say that now we are at the top and we are the best in this. It's a continuous improvement. We have improved a lot, but then it's still a long way to go.
Do you think that that's the biggest opportunity for improvement within Telenor right now?
I think so, because so far what we have done is we have transformed a large portion of organization on analytics, on digital transformation, which we and agile transformation under what we call as a consumer business and the whole IT. There is an opportunity to expand that, and we are actually working on that. And how do we actually make the whole Telenor agile and work on this principle?
Mm. That's a good approach to have, I think. For you personally, we've mentioned a lot of the successes. What do you think was the biggest mistake you made during your career?
I would say probably quite a few. It's not just one, and I think those have been the biggest sources of learning as well. And it ranges from, tech and more from change management leadership perspective. I think the biggest one is, again, in one of my previous companies, where we were running a transformation, and it was actually a turnaround of the whole situation from a tech perspective more. And I think we got again carried away by tech in a way, and we launched products which were not ready at that time, and that resulted in immediate, I would say, loss of trust from the stakeholders on this, on the whole transformation. The systems weren't working. The promises that we made weren't really actually delivering the value. And we actually got up into a lot of problems. But then over time, what we did is that we took a step back, and we took our time to fix those problems one by one, and then started our journey there. So reflecting back, I think instead of launching that transformation project, I would say in bit of a pressured against time, we should have taken more time to do it properly and launch. Right? That's I think the biggest one, I would say.
Mm. Well, it sounds like you learned from that, and that's always the main point, right? A big question that's coming up in the community for us right now is the impact of COVID-19. What are your general thoughts on that?
I think it's a big one. We should not actually consider it small in any aspects of it. It has, of course, impacted people's lives, both in terms of, let's say, the health, but then also professionally across the globe. It is impacting the economies already, and it will continue to impact global economies at that scale. So my thoughts are that it is going to change many things the way we do in this world.
And how has it affected your day-to-day role?
I think from our perspective, what we have seen is people have started to use more and more of data services. Even not only just data, they have started to make more voice calls. So we are seeing more usage, and then but then at the same time we are seeing much lesser international roaming, both inbound in countries and then outbound. So then on the other hand, there's a much less footfall on the stores, up to in Sweden, up to 25 to 30% lesser than usual days. So it is impacting in many ways.
Yeah, regardless of who we speak to, it's impacting everyone as individuals, also as you mentioned in organizational terms as well. Exactly. What's your top working from home tip?
I would say, at least from my personal experience, two things. One is that the formal meetings and our day-to-day check-ins is something which is easier to manage, but what we miss out is the informal discussions, the chit-chat that we used to have in the office, much easier than here. So I think it needs a conscious, deliberate effort to set up time for just giving a call to somebody without any reason to have an official meeting or something. So just make sure that we don't miss out on the informal connect or a relationship with our friends and colleagues. That's number one. And number two, I think it is very important to have a cutover in the work. In the beginning, it's the second week we are doing work from home. In the first week, I think where I struggled the most is that the work day was actually never ending here. So having a hard stop and then taking time to unwind, start your family time is extremely important, I think.
Definitely. I think keeping those boundaries as well is super key. Exactly. Do you have a routine? And if so, what does that look like?
I think yes, I certainly do, and it starts with let's say the office routine starts with basic check-ins with the team. How are we doing today? What's the plan? discussions around some of the burning topics from previous day, or anyway the challenges that the teams are facing, then discussing the solutions if they need help, etc. Then certainly the day is filled with some of the management meetings, some of the stakeholder meetings. So I would say it's most of around the meetings, different stakeholders, our teams, emails. But then what I try to do is block some time in the afternoon for reflection and planning. So I have daily 1 hour, 1.5 hour of my own time where I get some time to reflect back on the planning, on our strategy, on how things are, and being able to make sure that it's not only just planning and execution, but we have enough time to reflect and being able to alter and tailor our plans.
I think that's a great approach. I'm just thinking out loud here, but I would imagine that having that time to reflect gives you a chance to consolidate and strategically think about all of the information that's hit you in the day, and
Exactly.
make the right assumptions on it, and also remember it as well at its most basic level. Throughout your career, what's the best piece of advice you ever received?
I think one of my mentors once told me that it is equally important to be aware of what is it that you will not do, in addition to what is it that you are doing. So be always mindful of saying no, and being always mindful of getting rid of things that are not really adding value and you are still doing them. I think that was really valuable in prioritizing things properly.
And what are you curious about right now?
I would say quite a few things, but top of my mind, we have developed some of our new machine learning models. I'm curious to put them in production. The teams are working on that and start seeing the results. That's one. Then related to this coronavirus, in some of our other markets, for some of other diseases like dengue and malaria, we have used aggregated mobility data, where you are actually looking at aggregated travel patterns to see the spread and predict the spread before it happens. And the idea is not to be able to look at an individual, but then a group of people, not under, for example, 50. So you can't actually isolate an individual person, you maintain the privacy, but you see blocks of people who move, because these diseases actually spread with people movement. So I'm actually curious to know if we can do the same for coronavirus. And we are actually having multiple initiatives in some of our operating companies. So I'm curious to see the results of this.
It sounds like we can learn a lot. Who is your favorite
I
thought
think so.
leader or author or influencer in the data analytics space?
I would say not necessarily in data and analytics space, but I follow Simon Sinek a lot, primarily for his well thought out research and his views on modern day leadership challenges. So I think that's very close to my heart, that I would recommend.
And do you have a favorite quote, whether it's by Simon Sinek or someone else?
It's not by Simon. I would say my favorite quote goes back to Socrates, when he says that true knowledge exists in knowing that you know nothing. I think what this points out to, a very important trait of leadership is to be humble. That allows you to be a good listener and listen to others. That helps us in learning from everything, successes, failures, just having a cup of tea with a colleague. Everyone can teach you a lot as long as we stay humble.
Stay humble. Very good advice. And what other advice would you give for aspiring leaders in data and analytics?
I would then re-emphasize on this fact that as leaders, when you are setting up your execution strategies, your plans, do not get carried away by tech alone. Be always responsible for creating an impact and an outcome from what you are doing. I have seen young leaders actually focusing a lot on the outputs and the tech part and the cloud and so many other things, but then what business impact it produces. That not only just creates more value for the company, but helps you in having a much bigger impact and create a much larger engagement with the top management and the whole stakeholders across your company. So always keep a focus on the purpose.
Very concise advice from Sami Uddin Ahmad from Telenor Sweden. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here.